Okay, so we have already found zeros of functions. We're going to be talking about them specifically with polynomials right now. There are different words for zeros. We can call them zeros. What else can they be called? X-intercepts, good. What else? Very good, roots. One more. Solutions? Sound familiar? Okay, so those all mean the same thing, right? Okay, so let's fill in some of this definition stuff here. The x-intercepts, so boom, we use that term, of a function are also called zeros. Okay, so we've used those two so far, meaning the same thing. A polynomial function of degree n can have at most n real zeros. So if the degree is 4, I can only have 4 real zeros. I couldn't have 5. I think that would probably make sense. Okay, so an even degree polynomial has an even number of real zeros or no real zeros. An odd degree polynomial has an odd number of real zeros. Okay, an odd degree can't have 0 because this is an odd degree right here, and since the end behavior is opposite, it's going to have to cross through the x-axis. So you can't have 0 zeros, but you could for an even. All right, so let's talk about linear factors. The solutions, bam, use that word, to the equation f of x equals 0. Okay, so the solutions to the equation f of x equals 0 are the zeros of the function. They are also called roots. So there, we use all 4 terms, all talking about the same thing, right? If x equals c is a solution to the equation, then x minus c is a linear factor of the polynomial function. Okay, linear factor because that x minus c, that would graph a line if we just graphed it by. Linear factors can be found by factoring, hence the name factor. Okay, so we are going to factor this one to make sure we know the difference between the linear factors and the zeros and all that good kind of stuff. So I'm going to start to factor this one. The first thing I can factor out is an x because I got a GCF. That leaves me with x squared plus 5x minus 24. Right? So then I can factor this trinomial, and since a is 1, I can go ahead and jump to my little parentheses here. I'll have x and x. Since this is negative, the signs are opposite. I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me 24, subtract to give me 5. What would they be? What numbers multiply to give me 24? 8 and 3. Good. Positive 8, negative 3. Right? So then if I set that equal to 0, my linear factors are these 3 things right here. So my linear factors are x, x plus 8, and x minus 3. Those are the factors. The zeros come from setting the factors equal to 0. So my zeros are, x equals, we have 0. This would give me a negative 8 and a positive 3. Make sense? We good? So when it says find all the zeros of the function below by factoring, that means I'm going to factor and solve, like do the whole thing. So we're going to start with number 2. And when you factor, what's the first thing you should always look for? GCF. Do I have one in number 2? X, good. So I'm going to say 0 equals, I'm going to factor out my x. That leaves me with 2x squared minus 5x minus 3. A is not 1, so I can't jump to my 2 parentheses. I'm going to have to factor by grouping. So 2 times negative 3 gives me a negative 6. I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me a negative 6 and subtract to give me 5. What are they going to be? Negative 6 and positive 1, because I got to multiply to give me 6. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so then I have 0 equals x times 2x squared minus 6x plus x minus 3. Since I have that little x out front, when I start to factor by grouping, I'm going to use a bracket so I don't get lost in my parentheses. So this will give me x, and then I have a bracket. I can factor out a 2x. That leaves me with x minus 3. Then, oops, out of this, I can factor out a 1. That leaves me with x minus 3. Okay, then I'm not done factoring. 0 equals x times 2x plus 1 times x minus 3. Everybody okay with where everything came from? Ask me questions if you got them. So now that I have it factored, this is fully factored right here. Then I'm going to get my zeros out of this. And they really should be from least to greatest. So this one just gives me 0. We can't forget about him. He's important. This would give me negative 1/2, and this would give me 3. So negative 1/2, 0, and 3. What questions do you have? Anything? Speak up if you got anything. Okay. Well, only 4 of you, so we got plenty of time for everybody to get their questions answered. All right, so let's look at number 4. This is, again, just kind of a review factor because we've been factoring for a little bit. This is to the 4th power. But if I have this to the 4th, this to the 2nd, and then no x, I don't need to freak out. I'm just going to treat it like a trinomial of the other ones. I don't have a GCF. A is not 1, so I have to multiply 9 times 4 to get 36. Then I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me 36, add to give me a negative 37, negative 36 and negative 1. Yep. Okay, so then I'm going to split that up, and I'll get 0 equals 9x to the 4th minus 36x squared minus x squared plus 4. Right? So now that I have 4 terms, I can factor by grouping. In these first 2 terms here, I can factor out a 9x squared. That leaves me with x squared minus 4. Out of these 2, I can factor out a negative 1. That leaves me with x squared minus 4. Okay, so 0 equals, and I have 9x squared minus 1 times x squared minus 4. Can I keep factoring? Yes, because these are both difference of squares. So I get 0 equals 3x plus 1 times 3x minus 1 times x plus 2 times x minus 2. So when I get my zeros, here I'll get a negative 1/3, a positive 1/3, negative 2, positive 2. Y'all know how I'm getting those, right, without writing that out? We good on that? So what I can do here is I can write this as plus or minus 1/3 and plus or minus 2. It's fine to write all 4 of them out, but you can also condense it like that. Either way is fine. Okay. What questions do you have? We good? I wasn't lying when I said factoring, 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 and it's not going away. All right. Let's look at number 6. Number 6, I have 4 terms. So if it's already in 4 terms, I'm going to factor by grouping, and it's already split for me. That's fantastic. So 0 equals, out of these first 2 terms, I can factor out a 4x squared. That leaves me with 5x minus 3. Out of these 2, I can factor out a negative 1. That leaves me with 5x minus 3. So then I get 4x squared minus 1 times 5x minus 3. Can I factor some more? Yep, I got a difference of squares there. So I get 0 equals, I get 2x plus 1 times 2x minus 1, and then 5x minus 3. So here I have negative 1/2, positive 1/2, so I can say plus or minus 1/2. And then here, this would give me 3/5. What questions do you have? Anything? All right. So then we have multiplicity. Okay, so we're just going to add a little something onto here. The multiplicity of a 0 is the degree of its corresponding linear factor. So let's do number 7, and I'll show you what that means. So we're going to factor this. So 0 equals, I can factor out an x. That leaves me with x squared plus 10x plus 25. All right, so then 0 equals x. And then I can go ahead and jump to this since a is 1. So I have x and x. And then two numbers that multiply to give me 25, add to give me 10. 5 and 5. Okay. So I need to rewrite this one more time and say that 0 equals x times x plus 5 squared. Okay. Now, and let me show you a little shortcut here too. If a is 1, and when you have this trinomial, if you can take half of this and square it to get that number, then it's a perfect square trinomial. It's like a little shortcut to undo it, if you recognize that. Sometimes I don't recognize it either until I've factored and I was like, oh dang, look what I could have done, whatever. So now that I have this, it says find the zeros and state their multiplicity. So my zeros are 0 and negative 5. So when I do this, I would say I have negative 5. Since it is squared, since that linear factor is squared, its multiplicity is 2. Multiplicity of 2. And then 0, which comes from here, has a multiplicity of 1. And that's it. It's that easy. Okay, we good on that? So let's factor number 8. I got a GCF. I can factor out a negative x squared. That leaves me with x squared minus 6x plus 9. Now let's look at how this shortcut works. When I look at this, so I still have negative x squared. When I look at this, half of negative 6 is negative 3. When I square it, I get 9. That means that this is just x minus 3 squared. So my zeros, I have 0, and it has a multiplicity of 2. And my 3 has a multiplicity of 2. Okay. Everybody okay with that? All right, so let's look at what this means for us when we're graphing. So if we factor this, this will give us f of x equals x times x plus 2 squared. Okay, so I'm just going to give you that part. And then we want to sketch this. We know how to do this, right? This is an odd degree, so my end behavior would look like this, right? My zeros are 0 and negative 2. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so I got a negative 2 and a 0, which means that's also my y-intercept. What does this squared mean that happens? Bounce. Okay, so I start down here at negative 2. I'm going to bounce, and then I go back up like this. Okay, that's what we had been doing, right? We're going to get the real words for bounce and wiggle, though. When the multiplicity is even, like this, like we've been doing, the graph is tangent to the x-axis at that 0. That is our bounce when we're graphing, because that's literally what's happening. We're bouncing off. If the multiplicity is 1, like this, like it just goes straight through, then it just passes through. If the multiplicity is odd and greater than 1, so like the 3s and the 5s, then that was your wiggle, right? That wiggle is actually a point of inflection. On the x-axis, and that is your wiggle. So when you're writing it down for yourself because you're sketching, I like bounce and wiggle because that tells you literally what's happening. When you're actually answering a question, you have to use the real words like tangent and point of inflection, okay? So let's look at what this is asking us. We have to find our zeros. So this is already factored for me. So by x is equal to, let's see, I've got 1, 3/2, and -4. So -4 is my smallest, then 1, then 3/2 to go in order. So my zeros are -4, 1, and 3/2. So this -4, it comes from here. That multiplicity is 1. If it's just a 1, then all that happens is it passes through the x-axis. The 1 comes from here, and that's squared. That's even, so that's 2. The even means that it's tangent. And then 3/2, that would also mean that it is tangent. Does that make sense? Using the real words? All right, I'm going to give you the factored form of number 10, and then I'm going to have you fill this in. So if we factor this, we would get 0 equals x cubed times x plus 4 squared. Okay, so find your zeros, fill in that chart. That's what I got. Anybody have any questions for me? You can do this. You have to be able to factor. You have to be able to factor. We've got to keep on factoring tons and tons. All right.